Shalom, Most High in Christ bless. I'm Captain Yediah, and this is a message to our people who are scattered throughout the region of Australia and the Pacific Ocean. What many don't know in these last days is that God's chosen people are scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, according to Bible prophecy. Many of this is not being taught in the churches. Pastors are busy teaching things like prosperity and motivational speeches, and they are not digging deep into the history of the Israelites and who we are in these last days. God's people were told if they broke his commandments, they would go into slavery throughout the four corners of the earth. Many of you are not familiar with the history of Australia. Many of you have never heard of the term, the First Fleet. The First Fleet is very important because it tells you how Australia became the melting pot that it is today. So let's examine Bible prophecy and how it relates to our people in Australia and the regions of the Pacific and Indian Ocean. The book of Isaiah, chapter 11 and verse 11. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and from Elam and from Shinar and from Hamath and from the islands of the sea. Australia is one of the islands of the sea, and you have many other islands near Australia. For example, you have Vanuatu, you have Papua New Guinea, you have the Solomon Islands. All of these are islands of the sea, places where the Israelites in the last days will be scattered. Why? Because they are suffering God's judgment because they broke his commandments. One of the critical events in the history of Australia is the First Fleet. The First Fleet was a convoy of 11 ships that left Europe in 1787 and made a journey to Australia. Many people on board were European settlers, but not only were there European settlers on board, there were also many blacks on board, some of which had been convicted of crimes in Europe, some of which were freemen that were on board with the European settlers. On that First Fleet, one of the 11 ships in the convoy was the Lady Penrhyn. The Lady Penrhyn was a slave ship that had been used in the transatlantic slave trade. The Lady Penrhyn was a 2-deck cargo slave ship that could hold 275 slaves. The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28 and verse 68, and it reads, And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. So it was prophesied that God would bring the Israelites into Egypt again. Is it talking about the physical Egypt that Moses split the Red Sea when he delivered the Israelites? No. The word Egypt means bondage. The Bible must be read precept upon precept. So when you go to Exodus chapter 20, we're going to read verse 2 so we can find out what Egypt means. The book of Exodus chapter 20 and verse 2, and it reads, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So the word Egypt means bondage or slavery. So God prophesied that in the last days, the Israelites will be scattered, and not only scattered, they will be brought into bondage. So let's read the scripture again. Deuteronomy 28 and verse 68, and it reads, And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. So it was prophesied that in the last days, the Israelites will be scattered by way of cargo slave ship. Just how we read in the history of Australia, that in that First Fleet convoy, it was made up of slave ships. And they made several stops on their way to Australia when they left Europe. And they picked up more slaves from South America, from South Africa. This is all Bible prophecy. Our people in Australia, many of you are the Israelites that the Bible speaks of, and you fit the curses written in Deuteronomy chapter 28. Bible prophecy is talking to our people. When you read the archives from the National Museum of Australia, many of you will be shocked to learn that over 62,000 Melanesian people were put into slavery in Australia, sugarcane industry and cotton industry. All of this is Bible prophecy. The Bible prophesied that this will happen to God's people. Many of you in the region of Australia and in the Pacific and Indian Ocean fit these curses that we read about in the Bible. Let's prove it. Let's go to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28, verse 15 and 16 to see if we can read about our people being put into cotton and sugarcane plantations. The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28 and verse 15, and it reads, "But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe, to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee." So it was prophesied that if the Israelites broke God's commandments, curses or evil things or evil conditions would happen to us as a people. Verse 16, let's read the first curse. And let's see if our people who descend from those who were kidnapped and blackbirded in Australia can identify with these curses. Verse 16, it says, "Curse shall thou be in the city, and curse shall thou be in the field." So many of our people in Australia today, you descend from Melanesian people who were taken from Vanuatu, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, and you were forced to work in the sugar and cotton industries of Australia. One of the main plantations was in Queensland, Australia. All of these things are a direct correlation with Bible prophecy. Why? Because many of you are the Israelites. You have been broken off from your heritage. You have lost your identity. You have adopted false customs, false traditions, and ideologies of the nations that are round about you. And it's time to come back to the truth and come back to who we are in God's laws, statutes, and commandments. Another component of us being scattered throughout the four corners of the earth is the fact that we lost our identity. We lost our heritage and we were cut off from our true self. We've been given false terms and false names like Australians, like Pacific Islanders, Aboriginal. Some of us call ourselves just indigenous people. None of these are our God-given names. Another term that was forced upon us by our oppressors, enslavers, and colonizers is Kanaka. Let's read the definition of the term Kanaka. And it reads, "Kanaka, a Pacific Islander employed as an indentured laborer in Australia, especially in the sugar and cotton plantations of Queensland." So what does that prove? What does that show you? It shows you that our people have suffered from slavery, blackbirding, and colonialism, and we have been given false names. Many of these names are derogatory and they do not reflect our true self and who we are on this earth. We are God's chosen people, and it's high time that we come back to who we are, come back to our laws, statutes, and commandments given to us by our forefathers. Many of you in the region of Australia and the islands of Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, you may wonder, why do all these things happen to us as a people? If in fact we are God's chosen people, why are we suffering? Why are we discriminated against? Why do we suffer redlining? Why do we serve in cotton and sugar plantations? Why were we blackbirded and taken from our homes? Why did we lose our nationality and our identity if in fact we are so great? If in fact you are God's chosen people? I'll show you. Let's go to Bible prophecy and let's let God speak. Let's go to the book of Amos, chapter 3 and verse 1. And it reads, "Hear this word that the Lord hath spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying, You only have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore, I will punish you for all your iniquities." So what is that showing you? It's showing you that no matter where we are on the earth, whether we're in Australia, whether we're in Europe, whether we're in the continent of Africa, North America, South America, the Israelites are scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. But no matter where we are suffering God's judgment. Why? because God, as a father to us, he only punishes his own people. God is not concerned with the other nations. God is concerned with you. And it's time for us to come back to who we are and get back in right standing with God. We must keep the commandments and the faith of Jesus Christ, the Black Messiah. In these last days, Australia is filled with a wide variety of many different races of people. Outside of those who were taken to Australia in slavery, through blackbirding, who were taken from their homes and put on slave ships and brought to Australia to work in sugar and cotton plantations, many people in Australia today have migrated, whether it be from North America, South America, or the continent of Africa, or even Europe. Many of them have migrated to Australia looking for a better life. Why is it that our people have to constantly pack up and move over and over again in search of better hope, in search of equality, in search for a better life for their wives and children? Why is that? Because it is Bible prophecy that in these last days we will suffer hardships and we will not be accepted. We will be looked down upon and we will be hated by many of the other nations that surround us. Let's read the Bible. The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 28 and verse 65. And it reads, "And among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have rest. But the Lord shall give thee there a trembling heart and failing of eyes and sorrow of mind." So in these last days, the continent of Australia and the surrounding islands are filled with people who are looking for a new life, looking for hope, looking for equality. And you will not find it until Christ returns. We are the Israelites, and all these things are curses to provoke us to righteousness, to turn us back to God, away from our sin, away from man's traditions, away from the philosophies of the nations around us, so we can come back to the one and true God.